It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. I'm looking forward to this particular chat today because we're going to be doing some reminiscing of the year 2022 and some predictions for 2023. It'd be interesting to get both of your perspectives on what your top three subjects were.
My third most important political story of the year, and I must say the rankings are pretty close, is the midterm elections with the Democrats holding the Senate. But most importantly, the rejection of the Trump election deniers in almost all of the key contested Senate races. I think, to me, that was, one of the top three big stories of the year.
Craig, what's your?
Yeah, I agree. I have it the same way. I think the midterms capped a year and have to go down as important. I had it number three because it's the pushback against Trump that we've been talking about all year long, but it finally was validated and showed up. I also think it triggers what's going to be a real interesting story going into 2023, and that's the Kevin McCarthy problems, where that margin of House members, Republicans, is so small that his speakership, frankly, I think as we sit here today and as the year ends, the speakership's in doubt, and it's all due to those midterm elections.
I'd go back. I want to go back to the McCarthy thing in a minute because my first prediction for 2023 was he's not going to be speaker. But I think what I rated second were the January 6th hearings. As we talked about throughout most of last year or this year, the hearings were sort of like body blows. First of all, the job that Benny Thompson and particularly Liz Cheney did was absolutely spectacular. Never in my lifetime have I seen a congressional committee make an argument as compelling as they did. It was a television production. And I think that sort of led to that was a big part of the midterm elections because, like body blows, they slowly drained the vigor or the strength from the Trump argument, and that showed up on election day.
Well, this is kind of uncanny. My second also was the January 6th committee, because I think all year long it provided a focus for something that we cannot ignore. I'm probably about halfway through the report, reading the report now that it's out, and it's just remarkable. Even having watched the hearings, the context that the written report provides is so amazing. And I thought one of the most interesting, literally, sentences in the document so far is the recognition by the chairman that those who really prevented Trump from being successful in blocking the election were primarily Republicans. And I hadn't thought about that. But whether they were in his administration, in the White House, in the Justice Department, the Republicans at the state level, it was people who were willing to stand up and say this is wrong that saved us from a real constitutional crisis. Not obviously, Democrats said the same, but the Republicans were in these positions to block him from doing what he was attempting to do, from what Rudy Giuliani and others were attempting to get him to do. And I think, and kind of in the spirit of Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney both, it's not only a report that tells us what happened, it's really aimed at preventing this from ever happening again. So I think it has to rank very high, and I did have it number two.
Okay, well, my number one political story of the year was the Dobbs decision in abortion. And as we first found out in the referendum in August in Kansas on abortion rights, even in red states, abortion was a motivating factor. And the combination of January 6th, the hearings and abortion I think was really critical in the outcome of the midterm elections, in both generating more Democratic enthusiasm in a year that should have been a pretty much of a red wave because of the fundamentals on inflation. But also, I can't help but believe that a lot of independent women and college-educated voters, including some Republicans, were affected by the Dobbs decision and voted for Democrats where they otherwise might not have in this election. The Kansas numbers were interesting because many more people voted to preserve abortion rights than there were Democrats voting in that election, and I think that turned out to be a harbinger of what was going to happen later in the year.
Well, so now we have a difference, although no doubt that decision reversing Roe versus Wade was highly emotional, reported, and certainly impactful. I actually have a tie, if I may, for first, one's domestic and one's foreign. On the domestic side, on July 13th, inflation hit a 40-year high. And I think that the inflation impact affects even more people, affects everybody across the country. And will have a longer term political kind of consequence, if you will, in terms of how we manage it, how we come out of this. But I thought a 40-year high on inflation, I gave number one on the domestic side. And on the foreign side, on February 24th, Russia invaded Ukraine, and I think probably has changed forever the way we and the West and view Russia, view Putin. Not that we had a high regard to start with, but this war, which was purely by choice, has simply changed the landscape, I think, with regard to where Russia stands. It gave Biden a cause around which to unite and support with Europe, defense and protect and help for Ukraine. And I think it's unfortunately going to carry well into 2023, but I do think as an event with political consequences on the foreign side, it was the number one event.
I have the most unappreciated political story of the year as being the return of bipartisanship, both domestically and around the Ukraine war. We had, for all the talk of polarization, and Lord knows there's plenty of it, there were a number of major issues, starting in last year with infrastructure, but the CHIPS bill, same-sex marriage, this latest spending bill to spend the government, to continue the government, that got significant bipartisan majorities in the Senate. And, when Biden was elected, he said he was going to work across party lines. He had a little difficulty in his own party as they pushed him to take an untenable position. But when he got off that and got back to bipartisanship, he really had some real achievements. And maybe the biggest one was pulling the country and the NATO alliance together on Ukraine. The other thing I just got to throw in, because it's really important, and I have a personal bias for this, because Mort Kondracki once called me on the McLaughlin group when they did this stuff. It made me Politician of the Year in 1992. And I want to say the Politician of the Year was Liz Cheney, who did something that is really admirable and very rarely done, which is to give up her own political career for what she believed and for the good of the country and to save our democracy. And she deserves special praise for that.
And I'll add one more too, if I may, Dave. And in the spirit in which Al talks about Liz Cheney, I think very important political story, human interest story was Nancy Pelosi's giving up the speakership and her position of authority in the Congress. And whether you support her or embrace her or want to argue with her, she is a remarkable force. It was a historical time for the country to have her in as speaker, to have her play the role she played. And I think she deserves a great deal of credit. And when you think about it, it's not just her stepping away, it's those who worked with her stepping down from some of their positions and opening up these leadership positions for new, younger leaders. And as we've said before in this program, that's exceptionally important. And I think it's something that, again, she's leading on by stepping down.
Okay, now we're getting on to predictions. And Craig, we're going to start with you on this part.
I almost could take them all three at once, because you'll see why. It's predicting what won't happen. Kind of as Al has foreshadowed, I think at the end of the year, Kevin McCarthy will not be the Speaker of the House, even if should he become one for a while. I just can't see him either holding the position or lasting in the position. And I don't think that President Biden or former President Trump will be candidates for the presidency in the end of 2023. So 3 predictions of what will not happen.
It's always dangerous to make a prediction where the time frame is short enough that people are going to remember it. But I sort of believe that there's better than a 50-50 chance that Kevin McCarthy will not even be elected speaker. That Steve Scalise or somebody will wind up as the speaker next week. And I agree with Craig on Biden and Trump. That was my number 3 prediction, that neither would be a candidate in 2024. But I want to go to one other prediction, and that is that I think both parties are going to have a big challenge in 2023 in reining in their most radical elements. I mean, I look at what, even if McCarthy does get it, probably if he does get the speakership, the price he's going to pay is going to be unbelievable. I mean, the House Republican caucus is like an insane asylum with the inmates in charge, and I don't think that's going to change. But the Republicans also have another problem, and that is their party infrastructure. I mean, I saw yesterday that Ronna McDaniel, who's their party chairman, is under challenge. And I mean, think about this woman. She's one of the conspirators in this fake electors fraud. But that isn't good enough. Her 2 challengers are far to her right, including the pillow guy, Mike Lindell, who has a new conspiracy theory every day. And we've already seen, any Republicans who do rational things getting censured by their state parties. So the Republicans are going to really have a big problem. And I think that's going to lead actually Mitch McConnell to work more with Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden than even with the House Republicans. But my side isn't going to be left out, because the left in the Democratic Party, I am already are misreading the midterm results, and they are very likely to overreach, and that will prevent the Democrats from taking full advantage of the Republican disarray. Tom Etzel in the New York Times last week had a actually incredible story where he quoted the leaders of these left-wing groups that Justice Democrats and a couple others, is saying our goal isn't to swing seats from Republicans to Democrats. It's to make the Democrats more progressive. And the way they do that is challenge Democrats who can win in swing states with left-wing candidates in primaries. With AOC voting against continuing the government funding, I just don't get any sense that the left is going to pull back next year. And whenever the Democrats have a bit of good fortune, their most extremist elements tend to overreach, and I'm afraid that's going to happen again next year.
Greg, any honorable mentions?
Well, I saved three for the lightning round, and I'll touch on what Al was just talking about. I actually think that the extreme wings of both parties are going to weaken over the course of 2023, and that'll strengthen the center. And it'll cause candidates, as they look to 2024, to pay more attention to how do we get things done. Maybe bipartisanship, as Al talked about, will come back into the fold. But I think the center will strengthen, the fringes will weaken. Second, this goes to sort of how we live around the country. I think this hybrid working relation situation with offices and home offices is going to continue, and it's going to change fundamentally downtown urban centers and use of office buildings. And I just don't think that's going to come back now that so many people have gotten accustomed to, those who can, spending more time at home. And so I think hybrid work remains the same. And then I saved the best one for last, but I have to confess, I kind of borrowed it as I was doing a little research, and that it's my intergalactic prediction, and that has to do with the asteroid that was discovered this year. It's called 2022 AE1. And when it was discovered early this year, the forecast was it would strike Earth in July of 2023. With the help of scientists, I think I can now predict it's going to miss the Earth by over 5 million miles. And that's probably the best news for all of us out of these predictions.
Craig, I don't disagree with you about the center being stronger. But what I will say is that that doesn't prevent the extremes from causing trouble in the parties. I mean, one of the things in this Etzel piece is there are a bunch of studies been done, and I don't know, there are about 40 or 45 seats that have flipped from Republican to Democrat over the last 3 elections. Not one of them was it was endorsed by one of these left-wing groups, so the center has helped in the sense that the people who win those districts are centrists, but it doesn't mean that the ability that the extremes won't keep really both parties from having an opportunity to build a durable governing majority.
Yeah.
Dave, maybe we could predict that in 2023, Al and I will continue to be agreeable when we disagree,
Right.
but enjoy this show every week. Thanks.
Yeah, well, we can do that.
Thanks, and Happy New Year.
Perfect
New
way to
Year.
end it. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you very much indeed. We will see you next year.